This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth. Building wealth and protecting legacies since 2004. Invest better with Brenthurst.
Thank you, Ian. We've been treated to a soap opera over the last few months of the ad hoc committee and the Mkhwanazi initiated Madlanga committee. Now, it's your job to take notes, to watch. You know, we can watch from time to time and pick up a little bit and have a giggle here and get horrified or shocked. Big thing in South Africa to get shocked by some kind of development. Can you, in a nutshell, just tell us what you've seen? Clearly, it wouldn't be right for you or for us to ask you to tell us what the conclusions are, but what have you seen in these months of commissions, two of them, that we didn't know before?
Well, firstly, I think on a lighter note, I think you're spot on with the soap opera comment. It does get quite dramatic sometimes. I think, firstly, both of the initiatives have seen significant increases or extensions, rather, for how long they can still keep going. Now, hopefully the ad hoc is almost finished because there's a lot of other work that we also need to do. But the long and the short of it is that the problem is far deeper than what we realized. The one hopeful thing, in my opinion, is that a lot of the so-called kingpins are connected to so many other things. I don't think the kingpin group is actually that big. So I think this process allows us to really identify the key figures. And once you identify and remove them, it should really collapse the house of cards. But the crisis is much bigger than what we realized. The integrity management crisis is something that I've been moaning about for a very, very long time. And every time we hear more, it just seems that it actually is a deeper problem than what we realized.
So General Mkhwanazi did a service to the nation by standing up, even though he might have done it in a way that surprised many.
Yeah, so what a day. I think that I might not necessarily, as you said, some might not always agree with exactly the way he did it, but I think he opened a wound that desperately needs surgery, and it's forced the hand of many people to actually act. I think what's problematic about what's happened after that is that many of the people who have been speaking or that have had to come and testify did actually know about the problems before, but they chose to do nothing. So you know, I don't for one moment, I said now when I spoke about the head of supply chain management in the police, that investigation with the fraud and the corruption from Treasury back in those days, that's already 4 or 5 years ago. He was still allowed to become a divisional commissioner in the South African Police Service. Has never worn a uniform in his life. Now suddenly he's the head of supply chain in the police. Now I guess one could motivate, he might not need to. I get that. They want to professionalize, etc. The point is just he doesn't understand the policing environment and has got a significant integrity issue, but is still allowed to come and serve there. The National Commissioner unfortunately knew this. They chose to do nothing.
Everybody's got an opinion on Mkhwanazi. Everybody here. They've seen maybe one part and they think he's a great guy, and they've heard from someone else, no, he's a crook, and they heard from O'Sullivan that he's the biggest crook there is and he leaves no prisoners. And that makes it very difficult for those of us outside to understand really what's happening. But when we heard from Melanie Vaness yesterday, and she repeated something that she said some months ago, that in every involvement she's had with him, she has been impressed. He has come across as a person of integrity, and he has come across as someone who is professional and wanting to do his job. Now, what you're going to say now is very important, because I think everybody here is going to have a new opinion of maybe the most interesting person in policing at the moment. So give us your thoughts on the general.
So let me give you a quick story about him. I'll be very brief. The one day we were doing oversight at the, also unannounced oversight at K9 unit in Durban. And we're walking through, and him and I are talking while we're walking up the stairs, and he's wearing his office uniform. And as we get to the first level of the building, Some of the police members set up a little private gym there where they could train when they have the opportunity to do so. And there's this pull-up bar, and he kind of kicks it and he says, "Hey, this thing is loose and you need to fix it." And the members say, "Sorry, General, we'll fix it." Yes, in the next moment, this guy jumps up, and while he's speaking to me, he's like going up and down doing pull-ups, and I'm like, what kind of general are you? We're not used to this, you know. So he is someone, from what I saw during the oversight, that is tremendously liked by a lot of the police members on the ground. They respect him. The way that he speaks to them when you visit stations, etc., even when he didn't know that we were there or listening or watching and so on, was impressive. And he is an extremely impatient man when it comes to poor service delivery. So that's on that side. I've heard bad things. I've heard people saying that, yeah, he's done corrupt things, but no one has been able to give me evidence of this, ever. So I haven't been able to fault Mkhwanazi. I've heard the stories, and you would have seen it in the ad hoc committee, about the handbags that allegedly were given to him and the current national commissioner at some stage, Louis Vuitton bags, etc. Again, first of all, part of that was way before my time, but I haven't seen any evidence given to me that could discredit him. What is problematic, though, is that a lot of the allegations that were made, we haven't seen evidence for. So it did open up a whole can of worms for a lot of things, which is good. But there were allegations made that we haven't seen the evidence for yet. Personally speaking, I get along with him well. I think he is competent. He understands the police very, very well. I think he's got a very problematic province. It's not like they have a magic cure for crime. In fact, they have massive increases in some areas. And I think that they are going to face some problems with regards to the amount of alleged suspects that are being shot there. And that's a whole other debate. This is just general commentary. But in my opinion, Alec, I haven't been able to fault him. It's only been a solid, respectful relationship. When you call him, he always comes back to you. He always answers, and there's always some kind of a solution in the pipeline.
Well, he's 2 for 0 at this conference. Anyway, let's talk about the commandos. You mentioned it. Would there ever be a thought of reinstating it?
Not if the ANC is involved. I think it's a political threat. That's why they don't want reservists either, and that's also why they want to disarm lawfully armed citizens. You can see that so much is just being centralized. The more power you centralize, and the more they are under threat as a government or a party that keeps losing, the more they start centralizing, not only to get their hands in coffers, but also to make sure that they can't be threatened by someone else. So I can't see it coming back. I also don't think it's the ideal solution. It was a solution that had some positives, but if you go look when the commandos were at their strongest, we had some of the highest farm murder numbers in the country ever to date. Between about 1998 up until 2002, 2003, it was very high. But again, that being said, it gave some kind of a statutory power to the community. And how wonderful would it not have been if that could just go over and they could be trained as reservists? I mean, I think we've got 2,000 or 3,000 active reservists in the country at the moment. In the space of 15 years, we've lost close to 70,000 reservists.
You mentioned farm murders. You need to give us some insight into the whole Donald Trump farm murders, kill the Boer chanting, because we see how much hot water the ambassador got into for simply saying, I don't believe the court is right when it says kill the Boer is not hate speech.
100%. So from my side, kill the Boer is hate speech. There's no doubt. And we will continue to say that. We can't allow to sell our souls because of just pure political correctness. Kill the Boers hate speech. It's unacceptable. It must never be allowed to be said or sung. regarding farm murders and the whole Trump issue, I don't think there's a genocide in the country. I've received a lot of criticism, especially from far right side, regarding that. But that there is a significant onslaught on farmers is a fact. It's the only, I think Theo de Jager is still in here, and years ago he said to me, Ian, it's the only profession that is sung about killing, that is praised when they are killed on social media. It's the only profession that is literally politically targeted and where it is okay to celebrate if a farmer is murdered. You can imagine if we suddenly have people saying that they should kill doctors in South Africa, doctors would be up in arms. But when it's a farmer, it gets disguised under the so-called struggle chant. It's just purely unacceptable. So I don't always agree with some of the rhetoric with regards to farm attacks. There has been a slight decrease over time. The numbers have stabilized in some areas, but we do see flare-ups. Just this past week in Lambert's Bay, a farmer was extremely hurt. They stabbed him numerous times. He had skull fractures, etc., after confronting cattle or stock thieves on his farm. And again, the cruelty and the torture that often goes along with it is something we don't see in any other crime. The only place that I have personally been exposed to extreme violence where we see that some of these so-called techniques are used are intimidation crimes by gangs in parts of the Cape Flats, where they would say, for example, a boy didn't want to join the gang, they'd set him on fire, or they would, cut his hands off, something like that. So those types of things, I know it's graphic, sorry, but those things do happen. But not nearly on the scale of the cruelty that we often see with farm attacks.
So why is there so much resistance to making it a priority crime?
I think it just doesn't suit the political narrative. It's that simple, and it's those who make the most noise in the political space that push back on that. I must say that internally, when you speak to SAP's senior commanders about farm attacks, there's no doubt that they recognize the issue. I've never, in the last 10 years, had a discussion with a professional police member who denied there being an issue with rural safety. It usually is political of nature. And then the one thing that I think is also important is that some people choose what they read. You know how many times I've shared information about a farm attack and someone would say, you're only talking about the whites that are being attacked. And I'm like, dude, the farmer was black. I didn't say his race. And in my personal opinion, it's irrelevant. The day that they pour boiling water over someone because they want access to his safe, I don't care what race you are. It's absolutely horrific that should happen to anyone. It can never be okay. So there's this race obsession, and the perception is often created that when someone is attacked, it must be a white farmer, which is also not always accurate.
You spoke about media smear campaigns. I've got to ask you about Paul O'Sullivan. Does he deserve the smear campaign that he's getting at the moment?
So I don't like the way that Paul does things sometimes. I think the way, and I'll say it openly, what happened with Sarah Jane Trent at the ad hoc committee, in my opinion, was...
What happened with her?
I think she was humiliated by some of the members, and I don't know why it was allowed, but in my opinion, someone like that should have had, this is just a personal opinion, should have had some kind of support from him, because, she did a lot of the so-called dirty work, the easy admin work to go and open a case, etc. And now she's being really humiliated and hurt in the process. It was really bad to see the level of what I believe is post-traumatic stress that she admitted to having in front of the committee. I wouldn't be saying it public like this if she hadn't. And I think it was extremely cruel. So I don't like the way that Paul does things. I think that he has done good things in the past, but at the same time, it does feel to me that it wasn't necessarily always an objective approach. It does suit a specific agenda or a narrative. I think one of the negative things that Paul did is after Mkhwanazi's press conference, he was one of the first people to go off in the media instead of just watching and checking the landscape first, it sometimes is important to just stand back and just see what's happening and get your facts straight. Because he came up for General Sibiya immediately. I mean, Sibiya was this saint, the way that he described him. And today we all sit here and we know that that is certainly not the case. Sibiya is definitely not a saint. In fact, there are many, many bad things that have come out. So yeah, I don't always agree with his approach. And I also think that there's a chance that he's put some of the good private investigator capacity at risk in South Africa, because there are people now that want to zoom into over-regulating some of those industries.
It's so interesting. You know, as we learn, we realize how little we know. Now we have had these commissions of inquiry, which are opening up whole new avenues of information that are challenging a lot of assumptions. And that's a good thing. That's always a good thing. But it's a reminder as well that we really do know nothing. We only have a glimpse of what's going on at the moment. And I want to take you back to July 2021 in KZN and imagine that the laws which are being proposed to disarm citizens had been enacted before that, what the consequences might have been?
If it were not for private, lawfully armed citizens, the damage to this country, never mind KZN, would have been massive. There's no way that the police or the SANDF, I mean, the SANDF ran out of supplies within 3 days, I think. Private people were arranging ammunition for the police to just continue trying to do something. I mean, cops were literally calling in tears, saying, please help us. We don't have anything to do our jobs with. We want to work, but we can't. So private citizens proved there that, first of all, they are a force to be reckoned with. Amen. I love that. And secondly, that they just emphasized why the state should never have a monopoly over your safety. The other part is that it really exposed in what poor condition our crime intelligence capacity is. And again, and it might be frowned upon by some in the state, I think it emphasized the importance of the private sector and private security and the work that they do, because I'm telling you that a large part of the so-called enclaves or safer spaces in South Africa is not because of the state. It is usually because of private institutions working along with relatively well-managed or good municipalities.
We were down on the beach a little while ago, and some guys got out their vehicle, 5 of them, close by the marine pool, in wetsuits, and they jumped into the pool, and Jeanette, being Jeanette, said, I want to take your photograph. And the guy said, no, you can't take my photograph, I'll get into trouble. So she said, but what are you doing? No, my children have to eat. And that was exactly it. They went in to go and poach abalone. But what shocked me was it was 200 meters away from a major tourist hotspot. What should I have done in that circumstance?
So first of all, Jeanette, you're brilliant. If you don't want to share the photo, I'll do it for you.
No, she wasn't allowed to take a photo. I wouldn't let her.
Yeah, but the fact that she wanted to, I'm hell of impressed. So that's brilliant. It's a good step forward. So, Alec, first of all, you can't really confront them. Some of the abalone poachers are really dangerous. I feel sorry for some of the people in the Houston community, especially here. You know that in about, I think it was 2011, 2012, around there, the police, along with agriculture and fisheries, were trying to arrest poachers that were in the water. Some of them were children. One of the matric boys ended up drowning in the process, and later on, a whole group of community members, gangsters, etc., came to the canine unit in Houston, and they set the station alight. And luckily, some of the cops were able to escape, and they got the dogs out as well. But that's how serious it was, and that's just here. Now, my predecessor in the police committee, who passed on, lots of other stories, that's a whole different discussion as well. But when she was the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, a lot of the fishing permits were were stops. And a lot of the people tried to make ends meet and ended up starting to poach. So it's not just a black and white issue. The problem is that now it's become heavily syndicated. It's something that's often directly traded for narcotics. Yeah, so it's important to report it for what it's worth. Local police, and this comes back to what I said earlier about political will. Local police don't have the capacity, and they simply don't stand a chance as a station alone to try and tackle them in the water. Never mind the broader issue.
So what can be done about it as the chairman of the portfolio committee on police?
Yeah.
Now, you don't want to say, hey, you're in Hermanus, fix Hermanus. But there are many of these kind of circumstances
I see
around
what
the
you're doing
country.
here. So it's a good way of using the opportunity. We've actually met with a lot of the private people that are involved in trying to combat this. I think it's something that is a potential capacity that can be built by the Department of Fisheries. If we look at the way that it has been done by DAF before, or what was previously DAF, they used to have reasonable capacity, and some of the people actually acted as reservists, from what I understand. So there is something to do there. The problem is that often the arrests are just low-level poacher arrests. That's not what we need. We need to cut the snake's head off. So you need to go for the big syndicate coordinators. So it's not something that can just be solved at this level. You need to make sure that you've got dedicated investigative capacity just for that. You need to have dedicated court capacity just for that, because it's a broader organized crime issue.
Well, you've got a new Minister of Fisheries. There's a challenge for him. Lots of questions, starting with Rob Hersoff's question here. He says, you said South Africa's drenched in gangsterism. Do we stand any chance of reversing this, and how?
So, not necessarily every single part of El Salvador, but I think we desperately need a lot more prisons. And if you in any way affiliate with a gang, you need to be properly convicted according to the POCA Act. It's something that doesn't happen nearly enough. It's the Prevention of Organized Crime Act. And it's something that, in my opinion, if done correctly, could put a lot of gangsters away for a very long time. Problem at the moment is we have haphazard arrests of gangsters. They're all low-level gangsters, and when they get to prison, it's like a family reunion. So it doesn't solve the issue. I spoke to a ex-headmaster the other day in Mitchell's Plain. My political constituency is in Mitchell's Plain. Speaking to an ex-headmaster, and he says to me, I used to arrange tours to take the kids to Polsmoor so that they would not, that they could see where they would end up if they get involved in this. He says the problem was they all knew someone. And so we need a different mindset. It's not purely something that you'll just police away. There's this Pablo Escobar kind of mindset that some of these gangsters feed the community, and therefore the community is scared of acting. For example, in a part of Tafelsig in Mitchell's Plain, in my constituency, there was a time about last year that if you drive in with police, you'll hear all the older ladies shouting Albert. They shout Albert, 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 and they whistle. And that's how they warn everyone that the police are entering the area. But that is often the very same auntie that tomorrow, when the police do something or do not do something, comes and complains about it. So there's a mind shift that needs to be made there. Obviously, you need to get rid of corruption as well. Mark Shaw, in Give Us More Guns, writes that the estimate around Mitchell's Plain, you've got between 100 and 130,000 gangsters or gang-affiliated people. So it's a big problem. I've got no doubt that we can stop it. This is about political will. These guys are connected up to a senior level. I don't think many of them are very clever. There are specific kingpins that need to be targeted. SARS needs to pull up their socks and do something to them. It's always easy just to blame the police, but at the end of the day, some of the cops do solid investigations, then the prosecution falls flat, or they don't have the support from senior people that they need.
So it's manageable. It can be
Absolutely.
attacked. Henk Dace asks, do you support the MK and EFF treatment of Paul O'Sullivan in the ad hoc committee?
not at all. I don't see why they need to try and humiliate someone. If someone is blatantly a criminal, I don't mind going hard at them and tackling them and confronting them. I've personally done it myself, but I don't see you play the problem, not the man. And the way that they've tried to humiliate some people is unacceptable.
Sean McLaughlin has come a long way. He's come from Edinburgh, so we give him a question here for sure. How far are you prepared to go to get devolution of policing to the Western Cape, i.e. bring down the government, don't pass budgets?
So it is a suggestion that I've also made that we should push back on budget because of the expansion of police powers. Devolution is not something that will happen overnight. It'll be a slow expansion. I am pro that because I don't think that it's as simple as just handing over the keys. I think that what they could potentially start with is saying, for example, the city of Cape Town has forensic capacity to do ballistic testing, and they've got investigators that can assist with gang-related gun offences. Just that as a start, and we'll immediately start seeing results. Again, I must ask the question, why would Minister Kachalia and co not allow it? Because it's the ultimate force multiplier. The cops on the ground are begging for it. Both SAPS and Metro want to do that. So it's purely political. I don't have the sole mandate to make the decision on the budgets, but I'm a supporter of pushing back on budgets for that reason. And at the same rate, I would push back to make sure that SAPS, especially on operational level, do actually get adequate budget to fix certain things.
You say purely political. So the party says we want control to be centralized. That's our policy, and that's what we're going to fight again, even though it's irrational.
Sure. So let me give you an example. I found out, I've actually never said this publicly, but I found out probably beginning of last year that we usually have a police committee on a Wednesday. Every Tuesday night, there are senior officers of the South African Police Service that brief the ANC members of what is going to be discussed in the Police Portfolio Committee. Now, I know this, and I don't have sleepless nights about it because I can't see it being a very fruitful discussion. So they can chat all they like. We're still going to go and sort out what we need to sort out. But that's the kind of loyalty that there is between certain officials and this rotten cartel.
Well, it's cadres, isn't it? How many generals do we have in South Africa?
A shitload. A lot.
Tini van der Berg asks, Ian, many of us are finance professionals, and serving in some way in our area of expertise wouldn't really introduce us to much risk. However, areas like yours or any area close to corruption, such as liquidators, may not be safe. Are you concerned about your safety or others in similar areas?
I am, but so I don't say it in a naive way, that I also don't have sleepless nights about it. You mentioned Carla earlier, my wife. Her and I made a career decision to say we're going to tackle this to the best of our ability. From a faith perspective, that is our foundation. So, and I don't see it in a naive way. I am careful. You know what? We were attacked last year in Philippi. We won, but it still wasn't. It was a terrible experience, and it could have been much, much, much worse.
Just remind people what happened.
We were doing oversight at a police academy because of massive corruption once again. And on our way out, I was driving. We actually arranged a car that doesn't draw attention. We were driving back to the airport to drop off a colleague at the airport from Philippi, and she was sitting in the back. Nicholas Gotzel, my colleague, was sitting at the front left with me. And as we were driving through Philippi, a municipal bakkie stopped next to us and said, "Please be careful here." And I said to him, "Hey, we know the area. We've been here often. Don't worry, we'll be careful." And next moment, a taxi stopped, and the taxi driver said, "Guys, please be careful here." And again said, "Yeah, we know." And Lisa, sitting in the back, suddenly said, "Something doesn't feel right." And I, 99% of the time, I tried to have a firearm on me. And I said to her, "Don't worry." And when I looked around like this, they hit me on this side. They struck me several times behind my ear, They broke all my teeth at the top, split my lip here and my bottom lip. And then me and this guy we were in an altercation with each other. And the next moment I just heard the shot on the other side. And I didn't know whether it was another brick, but then they started beating Nicholas and he was bleeding profusely. He basically collapsed forward and we were boxed in, couldn't drive, and they just kept coming. It's not like they just threw a brick and ran off. They kept beating us. And they tried to get in by Lisa, and Nick had lost consciousness, so I didn't know, was he shot? Did they hit him? Is he passed out? What? I didn't know if he was alive. And reached over and I fired a shot at the guy that was trying to get in over Nicholas. I found out later that I hit him in his chest. He's still in custody, and they've abandoned their bail application. 2 of the 3 are still in custody. The third one was shot dead by someone else in December doing the same thing.
Ian, we owe you. John Mark asks, regarding the Tembisa hospital saga, why do we see asset forfeiture unit taking Lamborghinis, but SAPS not arresting the owner?
So first of all, SIU, they don't arrest, as many of us know. They forfeit, and I think they're a phenomenal institution. So I just want to say that about them. And I think it's great that Andy Motibi has now gone to the MPA. I think he's a solid guy. Regarding the SAPS investigations, in my opinion, political will once again. In fact, the DPCI, the Hawks, should have actually led quite a bit of that. And there's this huge confusion between the organized crime unit in SAPS and the DPCI. And it seems that there's this to and fro sometimes about who controls what. The DPCI, in my opinion, has been hollowed out to a large extent. There are incredible people that still work there. But if you go to their offices, it is horrendous to see in the conditions that those senior officers work in. So, my opinion, it's political will. That's the main reason.
And the appointment of Andy Motibi, though, does appear to be, at least there's some political will to get the NPA right. How relevant was that appointment?
I didn't expect it. He didn't tell me anything. We speak now and then, but it's always work related. So I think it's a very positive move. And I must say, we spoke about it last night. It's like Eskom. There have been a lot of arrests and people charged in Eskom the last year. So I don't say these things just to make it sound like everything's bad. I can honestly tell you there are a lot of people that are working day in and day out and fighting back in the system. I mean, if you look at just in the past week, SAPS have got, they in a knot, let's put it politely, about SAPS members that own taxis. And we've been calling them out about this for the past 2 years because it's a conflict of interest in this very violent industry. I mean, this morning, 3 people were shot dead in Delft. Again, taxi drivers. And despite that, SAPS didn't act. So we said to them a week ago, every day, every few hours, I'm going to release another officer at another station with his rank that we know we've identified that is involved in the taxi industry. And we won't stop until we see them being dismissed or arrested. And that's just the way we need to sometimes do things. The funny thing is when we do that, we suddenly see movement. So it's not the ideal opportunity. We obviously need to fix the whole thing. But in the meantime, we'll continue to do those types of things.
Thank God for the internet. It is something that makes this kind of distribution very quick. And thank God for you, Ian Cameron.
Thank you.
This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, South Africa's leading boutique wealth manager. Trusted to guide families for over 20 years. Invest better with Brenthurst.